When Deltarune's first chapter released, one of the most conspicuous details was the fact that Kris was the only human in Hometown. Most of the characters in Hometown had counterparts in Undertale, and Kris seemed to be a fusion of Chara and Frisk based on their name and outfit. Not to mention the ending that made everyone think they were possessed by Chara. In Undertale, it made sense that Frisk was the only living human in the underground. Monsters were sealed away and killed every human who entered so that their souls could be harvested to shatter the barrier. But why wouldn't there be any other humans in Deltarune, where the monsters live freely on the surface? Hometown in general is weird. It has a mysterious shelter, an ominous singing lake, and it's completely cut off from the outside world, at least as of recently. The town's internet is out, TV broadcasts are looping, mail isn't coming in. Maybe the whole town's just Gaster's little simulation bubble, but it almost feels reminiscent of the underground. Because the underground is a completely closed system from the rest of the surface, the being with the most determination can freely reset time in that closed system, while the rest of the world goes on unaffected. And then there's Hometown's religion, which, while having elements of Christianity, seems very specific to their own town. No contact with the outside world, hyper-specific religion. Wait, is Hometown a cult? Now, that's a rather wild claim. And honestly, Chapter 5 will probably disprove this. But I think there's a fun narrative we can play with here, if you'll bear with me. We already know that there's a conspiracy brewing in Hometown. Kris, Carol, Asgore, and December Rory Night Holiday all have that nefarious group chat. It seems that whatever they're planning, it involves trying to bring about the prophecy. After all, if the Night really wanted to cause the roaring, then they would have done so already rather than aura farming on some teenagers. I don't think the first Dark World was opened up at the start of the game. At the very least, the sheltered Dark World has likely been there since before Destin's disappearance. But if this prophecy, fragmented though it may be, is part of a global, mainstream religion, how has nobody else figured out how to make a Dark World yet? Sure, you have to know what it is, but if somebody could stumble into it here, they could do so anywhere. But maybe the first Dark World was opened up in Hometown. The Dark Worlds act kind of like the Upside Down in Stranger Things, an in-between space layering elements of the Abyss or the Depths onto the regular world. And that creates a weak space where more dimensional punctures can be made. So if Dark Worlds have been happening in Hometown for a while, who was behind them? Well, what if the Fun Gang were the first Delta Warriors to fit the prophecy? What if, in the words of Scooby-Doo Mystery Incorporated, this has all happened before? The prophecy is very intentionally vague. Roxy first describes the three heroes as a monster, a human, and a prince from the dark. The monster could be literally anyone. The human has to be Kris, though we'll come back to that. But even a prince from the dark feels like it could have alluded to Lancer. Come Chapter 4, and we get a slightly different version of the three heroes. The first hero, the cage with human soul and parts. The second hero, the girl with hope crossed on her heart. The third hero, the prince alone in deepest dark. And last was the girl. At last was the girl. There's been some debate about whether Noelle could be the girl instead of Susie, especially because of the repetition and the extra bit about how love finds its way to the girl. Sure, Noelle and Susie would probably end up together, but it could also reference the heart-shaped soul potentially possessing Noelle in the weird route. If they're both the girls in the different sentences, the prophecy gets an F for referencing two characters with the same descriptor. Kris's title as the Cage is also rather noteworthy. One could argue that the Cage doesn't actually need to be human, they just need a human soul, and since the prophecy is ignoring basic syntax, the parts could be anything. But the more obvious imagery is the vessel. The vessel has been the subject of intense speculation. As while the game claims that it gets discarded after the opening sequence, your choices are actually stored in the game's files, seemingly setting up a future role for it. Many have theorized that we'll eventually reclaim our vessel, or face it as boss. But I've got another idea for it. If the Fun Gang weren't the first Delta Warriors, what if the vessel was the original human? Now, this sounds kinda dumb, which it probably is. But it would be the first time Toby's done something like this. In Undertale, we're asked to name the fallen human. We assume at the time that we were naming Frisk, but it's eventually revealed that we were naming the long-dead Chara. Sure, we'd just seen Frisk fall, but the game was asking us to name the first fallen child. So what if this is the same case? We're told that our vessel has been discarded, that nobody can choose who they are in this world. But that doesn't mean the vessel couldn't have then lived their own life. Think about it. Let's say the soul had possessed the vessel. Would it have simply spawned into the world? Kris was already their own person, living their own life. Would there just be two humans? If the vessel is the first cage, who would the other two be? I think the girl monster would probably be Carol, considering her suspicious involvement with the knight. And while Ralsei could have been the same prince long ago, I think there's another option. Asgore. He is the Flower King, after all, so he would be a prince in his youth. The prophecy doesn't actually call the prince a Darkner, just a prince from the dark. And after his divorce, Asgore's isolated and depressed, alone in deepest dark. It's heavily implied that Asriel, Kris, Noelle, and Des were exploring the woods one night, lost where the forest would grow, until they followed Friend's pointed tail, leaving Kris soulless and Des lost in the shelter, with Noelle repressing her traumatic memories, and Asriel stuck at college where he can't reveal any lore to us. So how fitting would it be for the adventurous holidays and dreamers to be following in their parents' footsteps, down into the dark world they accidentally opened decades prior? And just like how Des was lost to the dark and transformed into the night, perhaps the vessel was lost, turning Asgore and Carol's childhood friend into the... I want to dissect the nature of the prophecy more, but to do that we'll need to compare it to Undertale's own prophecy. According to Gerson, the Deltarune foretells of an angel, the one who has seen the surface and will cause the underground to go empty. In true Tricky Tony fashion, this could represent 3 people, depending on the route. It could be Frisk, a human from the surface who either frees everyone in the underground during the pacifist route, or kills everyone in the genocide route. Similarly, Chara is a human from the surface who is at least partially responsible, depending on your interpretation for the genocide route. But I think the most obvious case for the angel is Asriel. He also helps the underground go empty by destroying the barrier in the pacifist route, and he first died after visiting the surface. Note that the prophecy mentions that the angel will return, and Asriel is the only one to go to the surface and then come back. Plus his biblical name, resurrection, and god of hyperdeath form scream angel. Interestingly, there is no role for the angel in the neutral route. I guess the prophecy is less absolute in this game. This is quite odd, as the neutral route is the default. But what if we've been missing another angel candidate? What if it's the player themselves? While we only see the surface of Undertale in the pacifist ending, we know what the surface is like in real life. And the only way to achieve the pacifist ending, where the underground goes empty, is to return to the game after completing the neutral route. Similarly, a genocide route is almost impossible to stumble into blind. Deltarune's prophecy and religion also centers around an angel. The identity of this angel is an active topic of discussion. One popular theory is that it's Noelle. She's called an angel by multiple characters throughout the game, and she has an increasingly prominent role in the story, especially in the weird route. She may even be the girl of the prophecy instead of Susie. But the most popular theory is that the angel is the player. We are an extra-dimensional entity embedded in Kris's soul. We are given angel symbolism in moments like Noelle's mansion. And most importantly, in the prophecy panel it states, the angel, banished, will finally meet with its desire. The image is obscured from us, but Ralsei says it's the angel, and Susie is unnerved by it. The black screen lets the player see their own reflection in it, and their reactions make sense if they're seeing a photorealistic human. Every other time we see a real human face in these games, it's associated with an eldritch horror. It'd be really interesting if the player was the angel of both Undertale and Deltarune. But that last prophecy could have a different, yet similar purpose. That's not the first eerie black screen we've seen in this series. At the end of the genocide route, when the player has achieved all their goals, Chara destroys the world, and we are left in a howling void. We have met with our desire to beat the game, and have been banished. Maybe the eerie thing that Susie saw was Chara's demonic face. Chara is not the player, but they've become inextricably linked. To further connect the prophecies of Undertale and Deltarune, consider that Deltarune is intended for players who have played, or at least experienced, Undertale in some way. This is mentioned by the official website, and by certain nods and dialogue options to things we would only know from Undertale. Consider again the prophecy of Undertale. The angel, the one who has seen the surface, will return and see the underground go empty. By returning to this series in Deltarune, we are seeing the underground go empty, because everyone's already on the surface. But Undertale's prophecy also has more direct religious connotations, which one would expect more from Deltarune's church. Undertale's prophecy is extremely similar to the idea of the rapture. After Jesus returns from heaven, the world is emptied as everybody ascends to the afterlife. Spamton compares the light world to heaven, and considering how the underground acts a lot like a dark world, the symbolism is pretty clear. But belief in the rapture tends to lean towards the more fanatical side of the religion, with some people even trying to accelerate it by ensuring everything foretold in the biblical prophecy is ready. So that brings me to the central question of this video once again. Why is Kris the only human in Hometown? We know it's unusual. Monsters ask Kris if it hurts to be made of blood instead of magic. Toriel checked out a book on how to parent humans, and Kris used to wear devil horns and asked when they learned magic. Why did Asgore and Toriel adopt such an unusual child? Like I said, it made sense in Undertale, when Chara fell through the barrier and had nowhere else to go. But why here? There are no other humans, so Asgore and Toriel would have had to actively seek one out. What if Kris was chosen specifically to fulfill the prophecy? The church says that the idea of the religion is that anybody can be the three heroes, but that's not really true. Kris is the only human, and therefore the only candidate for the cage. The prophecy cannot be set in motion until there's a human there to fulfill it. This might not even be the only instance of this. There is that random prophecy saying, Jockington grows the beard. At first I thought this was a joke, something he just scratched into the pew. But Tricky Tony mentioned it way back in an old livestream.
I knew it. Okay, yeah,
no spoilers. Jockington grows a beard. Spoiler.
Maybe Jockington was named so the prophecy could be fulfilled. Maybe all of Hometown is some kind of doomsday cult. Maybe the festival is actually a ritual to sacrifice Kris. Of course, it's more likely to have just been up to Asgore and Toriel. Could they be raising Kris as some kind of human sacrifice? Now, I know it sounds like I'm jumping the shark. That's because I am. But the idea of a sacrifice isn't unprecedented. Apparently the knight is planning to sacrifice Undyne. And if the final tragedy of the prophecy was the death of the cage, well, can't have prophecy without a human. Plus, we know the occult is a thing in this world, since Caddy and Kris tried to summon a demon. This doesn't really feel in character for Toriel, but Asgore, we know he's willing to sacrifice human children, at least in Undertale. That's what caused their divorce in Undertale. What if Toriel found out his plan here and divorced him in Deltarune? Yes, I fully expect Chapter 5 to debunk this, given how Asgore focused it will likely be. But I had a lot of fun making this crack theory, though I wish I'd been able to let it bake a little longer. Thanks for the 2 weeks notice, Toby. I have another Deltarune video planned where I analyze why the name is alternately spelled with and without a space sometimes, but that's a video that'll probably get more examples with the new chapter, so I'm happy to let that one cook a bit more. Subscribe if you're interested in seeing that.